Good morning, everyone else. Thank you so much for joining us today. Also, we want to be sure that we thank Michelle for helping organize this training this morning. We really appreciate you thinking of us and giving us this opportunity to present. We encourage everyone to ask questions as we go along throughout the entire presentation. And also, if a topic or question is being answered too broadly, please let us know. We want to be sure that we provide applicable information for each specific job role since we know we have a lot of people joining us from a lot of different places and different job titles. Don't be afraid to jump in so we can kind of make it more of a conversation. Um, but my name is Emily, and I am the marketing director here at Clinkscale's Elder Law Practice. I am in our Hayes office, but we do have offices in Hayes and Wichita, and we serve clients throughout the entire state of Kansas. We did just celebrate our 40th year celebration of Clinkscales, so that was a really big milestone for us that we're really excited about. And we do a lot of trainings internally. We do a lot with staff and with the public, and so we're really excited about this opportunity this morning. And we do have our attorney and managing partner, Jenny Walters, with us, and one of our care coordinators, Jessica Ritter, and they're kind of our Medicaid, Medicare experts in the office. And so we're really excited to bring this information to you today. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Just interrupt the presentation. That way we can stay on topic. Whatever works best for you all. We want to be sure this is really beneficial. I will go ahead and hand it over to Jenny and Jessica to get us started.
Okay. Hi, like Emily said, I'm Jenny Walters. I'm one of the attorneys. I'm in the Hayes office, and Jessica's in our Wichita office. And just to give a little background so you can understand why we've got both roles on here, our office, we're pretty unique as far as a law office goes in that when we have people that are dealing with a chronic illness, looking at Medicaid, that kind of thing, there's usually more going on than just, well, we need some paperwork, we need a power of attorney, or we need an estate plan, and everything will be fine. There's usually care questions, Medicare questions, questions about placement. And so our goal and our philosophy is to have a holistic approach to that, have a team that consists of the attorneys, such as myself, that can guide people as far as estate plan and financial questions and Medicaid and how to, as we'll get into, spend down and protect assets, but then also just importantly, give support on the care side and have the care coordinator accessible to our clients. And so I'll let Jessica give some background on herself as well, and then we'll jump into it.
Good morning, as Jenny said, and Emily. My name is Jessica Ritter. I've been a nurse for 23 years, mostly dealing with discharge planning and the MDS process. I'm sure there's some people that are familiar with that. Medicare is something that it's a beast of its own, so it's something that I learn something new every day, it seems like. So thank you.
Okay. And like Emily said, we really want this to be, if possible, a conversation. So if there's specific topics you want to go into more detail about, just feel free to put it in the chat. And we were curious kind of the composition of the audience. So if I don't know if everybody's in one room or if they're separate, if you could just put in the chat what your role is, or what mostly, if you're a group, what you consist of. Are you nurses? Are you billing? Are you admin? So we can kind of know maybe what side of things you deal with these topics on, and can kind of drive our conversation towards what might be most applicable. But we know we wanted to cover Medicaid, Medicare, Advantage, division of assets, liability. So we've hit those. The cheesy title came to me last night. I'm feeling a little embarrassed about it, but this is pretty dry topic. So try to make it somewhat entertaining, or at least an effort. So, okay, let's jump into the Medicaid stuff. I'm going to keep this pretty general. I'm not going to get into the law or any of the background. Medicaid's generally a needs-based program, an asset and income-based program. And Jessica made this kind of funny comment last night when we were getting ready to this, that both Medicaid and Medicare are just like rabbit holes. You go into dark places the more you go. And so I thought that was a good comparison. So we're going to go down that rabbit hole. The asset test is what I'm going to focus on the most, because the income piece of it, if care is costing $10,000 a month. The income test is basically if your income is lower than your cost of care, you've met the income test. And 90% of people are going to meet that test because they don't have enough income to pay for their long-term care. So with the asset test, I thought this is kind of the way I approach it, is to start going through the assets and putting them in different groups. And I start with the exempt assets, the assets that don't count towards qualification. And all of these have their own little rabbit holes. But generally, so the exempt assets, the most common are going to be the home. You get a vehicle that's exempt, income, producing property like farm grounds, pretty common for us, at least for me here in the Hayes office. If you've got a business property, if you've got a rental house, those things are not going to count. You do not have to sell them to qualify for Medicaid. If you've got a funeral plan, if the well spouse, if we have a husband and wife, if the well spouse has their own retirement account, those do not count, which is a really big one. And your stuff, personal property, we don't have to know about everything you've got in your house, all your tools. We mainly focus on what's going to show up on a tax return. What are you paying property taxes on? That kind of thing. And I've got an asterisk by the home because generally that's exempt for about 6 months. Because we always check the box that says you have the intent to return home. But after 6 months, there's a risk. Medicaid could say, you know what, it's been 6 months. You're not going home. We're going to start counting it. In that case, it either has to be rented or listed for sale. And so even if we've got income, we've got property, like there's some random lots in town that sometimes people have in these small towns, you know, those aren't going to be exempt because they're not income producing, but stick a for sale sign in front of them and you can change them to exempt. So the value of those doesn't have to count. So then we go to the countable resources, which is basically everything else: checking, savings, investments, stock. One that sometimes trips people up is their life insurance cash value. And we're going to record this. It's being recorded, so I think you'll have access to it. And we can send out the PowerPoint if we need to. Nobody ever knows their cash value of their life insurance. You purchase it 30 years ago, you pay for it, and you don't know the cash value. So that's usually something we have to dig for and something people don't think of. Again, real estate that's not income producing, like those random lots in town. Other vehicles. So you got one vehicle that's exempt, but the rule is that if you have more than that, if they're over 7 years old for Medicaid purposes, their countable value is $100. So they really don't cause a big problem. I've got an asterisk by assets in a trust. Medicaid's got some just odd rules about assets in a trust, where if a home's generally exempt, but if you've got it in a trust, like a revocable trust, it's countable. And so there's general rules for all this stuff, but sometimes we have to do some shifting around to make sure things end up in the right column. Like if people have their assets in a trust, we use trusts all the time, but for Medicaid, we have to get stuff out of it. So they'll still be exempt. And then another caveat is farm income. You can actually take a farm income and put it in that exempt column by moving it over to a special farm account. And so that, again, around my area, we've got a lot of farmers, and maybe there's somebody still at home getting farm income. We can move that over to a farm account so it's not counted, doesn't have to be spent down. The first step to establishing what our numbers are, so we know what's countable, but we got to figure out what value and when we use. So that's the resource assessment for a married couple. And it's based on the snapshot date. So that's the date that they first go into long-term care, or they went into the hospital and then moved over to long-term care. That's where we kind of take a picture of their assets at that point. That's what the division of assets is based on. And there's a special rule on this trust stuff that that doesn't apply to the resource assessment part, just the Medicaid application part. So I think it helps to have examples of how these things play out. So if we've got a husband and wife and they've got, usually they've got a house. Sometimes the wife has an IRA. They usually have a car, their personal property, their farm ground. Sometimes there's a funeral plan, usually not though. So those are going to land in that exempt column. We don't have to worry about them. We don't have to count them. Now we may have to transfer the ownership around. Like we would want the house, if the wife's the well spouse, I always make the woman the well spouse. We'd want the house to be just in her name. Get the husband off of it. If there's farm ground, get him off of it. Get everything in her name so she can keep the income, and to try to reduce an estate recovery lien. So there are some other tweaks we make to those assets. And then in this situation, that leaves the countable. Checking, savings is, we run into life insurance, cash value. They may have an investment account and another truck. And so then we take those assets, and this is how the division looks. So this is only the countable assets. I use 100,000 to make my math easy. Again, this is based on our snapshot. So if somebody's been paying for care for 4 months before they come see us, we're going to go back to that snapshot, and that's the assets we're going to divide. So anything they've been paying for care from that point on will come out of the spend down. It will count. Now, if they've been paying at home and that kind of thing, unfortunately, the rules are different. Generally, though, you're going to take the total assets, divide them in half. This is a paper calculation. You don't have to actually physically, okay, you have to put this money in this account and this money in this account. We have to actually divide everything up. This is just on paper. And sometimes people will come to me and say, well, we've always kept our stuff separate, or, this is my account, this is his account, this is my inheritance from my mom. For Medicaid purposes, if you're married, it's all one bucket. They don't care if you have a prenup, they don't care if you have a postnup, or where your money came from. If you're married, it's all one bucket. Divorce is a whole other rabbit hole that the conclusion is that we usually don't go that route unless it's like a blended family and they really do want to just literally get everything separate. So we take all that as of the snapshot, divide it in half. I'll get into some more rules about that. Generally, then the well spouse is going to keep their half. That's what's protected for them. They don't have to spend that on care. The idea being that if one spouse is in long-term care, we don't want both of them to go broke. So there are rules to protect them. So in this situation, if total assets are 100,000, the well spouse gets 50. Again, that's only the countable. If she's got an IRA, she's got her house, all that stuff is still hers and it doesn't count towards this. The ill spouse gets their half. And then in order for them to qualify for Medicaid, the ill spouse's half needs to be spent down to $2,000. There's that $2,000 asset limit. And so then what the analysis we get into is how are we going to accomplish that spend down? What kind of assets are there? Or is there life insurance? Is there a retirement account that needs cashed and we've got to withhold taxes on that? Is it all bank accounts? Is there real estate like those lots in town? Are they counting $10,000 towards this limit? Is there an annuity that's going to present us problems with cashing it out? So it all depends on where that money is. And I want to add something to that because I use that $100,000 example to divide 50-50, but there's a maximum and a minimum you're going to hit. And the minimum that the rules say they want a well spouse to have is $30,828. And the maximum where you max out on that division is $154,140. So let me show you how that, give an example of that. So let's say we have somebody that ends up with $400,000 of cash assets countable. We don't divide that into, well, the well spouse gets 200,000, the ill spouse gets 200,000 because you max out at that 154,000. So the way I kind of simplify it is the well spouse gets that max 154,000, and everything on top of that needs spent down to $2,000, which would leave about $245,000 to spend down. Okay, let's go to the minimum. Let's take an example of a couple that has $30,000 in cash, countable cash assets. We're not going to divide that in half to where the well spouse only gets 15,000 because the minimum they get is above that. So that well spouse is basically just going to be allocated the whole amount of countable assets, and there's no spend down. They're qualified. So again, then we look at, for each type of asset, how are we going to spend it down? So cash, that's the easy one. We look at, what I look at is how do we best use the money for those people and not just spend it all on care. Not that we don't, it's not that we don't want long-term care to be paid, but we want to make sure they're taken care of first, because when the money's gone, it's gone. You get the $62 personal needs allowance. You know, what needs taken care of before it's all spent. Could be $10,000 a month on care. And if there's a spouse at home, maybe they need home repairs. Maybe they need some things to make it more accessible so they can stay home longer and not end up in long-term care as well. Funeral plans are a big one. Always want to get those in place. It's an awkward thing, but Medicaid usually makes that a little less awkward because it's something you need to get paid for, again, before the money's gone. Pay the nursing home while we're getting things in place. Pay off credit card debt. Sometimes there's a mortgage to be paid off, and legal services. If you want help getting through this process, figuring out where to put assets, getting an estate plan done, that can count towards the spend down. You can also purchase exempt assets. So take that countable money, turn it into something that doesn't count. Usually the car is the most common option. Sometimes people haven't gotten a new car for a while. It's a good time to get one. You could also theoretically buy farm ground, buy a rental house. We don't see that a lot, but you could do it. And then finally, if there's nothing left to spend the money on, you know, that it's just going to be spent to go blow it and people don't want to do that, the Medicaid rules give us some other options to preserve that money for that well spouse using either an annuity or a promissory note plan. So here's an example of how we could use those plans. Basically, what an annuity or promissory note is doing is taking that cash that would normally be countable and converting it into income. Because if the well spouse is getting income to themselves, it's not counted towards the ill spouse. We can, to make it very simple, we can make that spend down money kind of disappear, be spent down by converting it into income. So back to our example of $100,000, we've got that ill spouse that needs to spend down to $2,000, their share of $50,000. Let's just take the whole amount. You know, there may be other things to spend on, but let's say there's nothing else. We can take that $50,000 and either loan it to somebody with a promissory note to get paid back. Usually it's a kid, or if there's no kid to loan to, or if it's just too much money, there's a Medicaid rule that if an annuity meets certain requirements, it's not counted. We call this a Medicaid qualified annuity. We can take that money, purchase the annuity. Let's say it's $50,000 and we have it pay out over 24 months. So then that well spouse, the wife at home, instead of spending all the money on care, she can keep that money through income that's payable to her over 24 months. And for Medicaid purposes, we have completed the spend down. It works really well if we've got somebody who just doesn't have a lot of money. Any money we can preserve for them is going to help them stay at home, help them pay their expenses, because maybe they're losing their husband's Social Security because of the liability. It just gives them a little more of a cushion to take care of themselves. There are, of course, we're meeting the Medicaid rules when we do this. And so in order to preserve that money and turn it into income, annuities have very specific requirements. I'll try not to get too detailed, but they have to be irrevocable, meaning you can't cash it back out. Non-assignable, meaning you can't sell it to another company. Actuarially sound, meaning we can't take $50,000 and pay it to a 90-year-old lady for 20 years because that's beyond her life expectancy. We got to look at the Medicaid life expectancy table and make sure we're getting it all paid out within that life expectancy window. There's some fees, but it is safe. It's a very locked in, safe place to put it. The promissory note, loaning it to somebody, the advantage is it's very quick. We can get to the end of the month to complete the spend down. Mom writes a check to her son for $10,000. We have him pay it back over 6 months. Spend down's done. But we also, there's just that trust factor to trust who you're loaning it to. The kid has to be comfortable with it. But there's no fees. We just got to tack on a little bit of interest on it. And there are some other Medicaid rules associated with that. It can't be canceled upon death. It can't be paid back all at once. But it's a really pretty slick option if we've just got a little money to spend down. So that's the cash. Just what we can do with it. Life insurance cash value can be a little more tricky because people don't like just cashing their life insurance policies. If you've got a policy with $3,000 cash value, but a $20,000 death benefit, maybe they don't want to cash it. Maybe we got to borrow from it. We always look at assigning it to a funeral. The catch is that if you've got a $50,000 life insurance policy, you don't want to assign it to your $15,000 funeral because it's an irrevocable assignment, and anything left after that goes to the state. So we only want to assign policies that match pretty well with the actual cost of the funeral. And then we also have to have the company cooperate and sign the can care forms for that. And so sometimes if the cash value's pretty equal to the death benefit, it's much simpler just to cash it out, pay the funeral in cash. There's some lesser known, lesser used rules. You can pledge it to the state to help pay off your estate recovery lien. This life care funding is basically selling your life insurance policy to another company for cash that would help you pay for care. And some final options: in limited circumstances, we can gift money away to spend it down. You probably are aware that Medicaid has that 5-year look back period on gifting. And so if somebody gives away money, and it's in the last 5 years before applying for Medicaid, for about every $7,500 they give away, that's 1 month they're penalized. And the penalty doesn't start till you're spent down or otherwise qualified. So what sucks is that you get spent down, you apply, they catch on to your gifting, you get penalized, and now you have no money to pay for your care. So if we've got prior gifting, we always factor that into our plan. But under certain circumstances, gifting works out really well because there are exceptions to that penalty. If a Medicaid applicant is transferring to a disabled child, it's not penalized. But we have to be careful. That child's disabled. Well, are they on Medicaid? So do we need to set up a trust for them instead of just giving it to them outright and then potentially kicking them off Medicaid? So there's some types of trusts you can set up for that. There's also a rule where if a child has been living in your home with you for at least 2 years and caring for you in a way that keeps you out of the nursing home, you can transfer your home to them and it will not be penalized. We got to get a doctor's letter for it, but sometimes we do run into that, and it's a really nice option to protect the home and kind of pay back that person that's been providing that care. If someone's under 65, they can take all their money and put it in a special kind of trust to protect it for them and qualify for Medicaid. The catch is that that type of trust, when that person dies, if any money is left over, it has to be paid back to Medicaid. But the nice thing is that it gives them a place to shelter their money to use to kind of supplement their needs on top of the $62 that Medicaid gives you. If you're over 65, we can fund a similar type of trust. There's some extra rules associated with that, but it's a nice option that's come up for a spin down in the right circumstance. There was a question about liability. So when we calculate the liability, our benefit specialists use this calculation, basically take the gross income from sources, usually Social Security, retirement, there might be some farm income, but you take the net income, subtract out Part B, subtract out the Medicare supplements, Part D, and the $62 personal needs allowance, and that equals the liability, which is then paid to long-term care each month. There is another special circumstance for a spousal allowance. If, let's say, that wife at home only has like $900 of Social Security, she's going to be entitled to some of her husband's Social Security instead of having it all go to long-term care. And so for that calculation, we have a separate form that we use to figure out, because there's a part of the Medicaid rules is that they want that well spouse to have at least $2,500 in income. So if they're below that, we can go through this calculation and allocate some of the husband's income to the wife to keep her income high enough to keep living at home. Okay. So that was kind of married couple. We've got a lot of opportunities to shift assets around and preserve it. But for a single person, let's say we've got the $200,000 in an IRA in a bank account, that's just going to have to be spent down to $2,000 before we can apply. But there are some options: spend down on funeral, prepay expenses, the normal stuff. I don't want to get into Jessica's time, so I'm going to kind of go through these quickly, but we actually do have some other options for a single person. We can gift some of it away using those Medicaid penalty rules, kind of to our client's advantage, to be able to preserve about 60% of that, and then use the other 40% to pay through the penalty. And that helps out. Let's say they're in a private room, and if they spend down to $2,000, then they've got no extra money to pay the private room. And sometimes Medicaid doesn't pay that. So we've got some extra money set aside. Maybe a kid is holding on to it to pay for those things. We always look at the disabled child, the caregiver child, and those other type of trusts as well. And then when all this is figured out, we apply for Medicaid when the spin down is done. And we know that we're going to have to wait, but Medicaid will go pay back to the point we were spent down. The unfortunate and the awkward part is that while we're waiting, we know the facility is not getting paid. However, there's a Medicaid policy memo that says if somebody continues to private pay for their care, let's say the husband's in the nursing home and wife continues to pay for it while the Medicaid application is pending, there's a chance that Medicaid then won't approve husband for those months because they're paid. And now it's complicated, but we advise our clients to only pay the liability because there's a risk that Medicaid won't come back and pay those months if they're already paid. Then we experience, if anybody deals with Medicaid, the delays. If we've been waiting, they're supposed to approve it within 45 days. If we've been waiting, we usually submit an appeal because that kind of takes it to the next level and gives them some more deadlines they have to meet. In reality, the state, it's like they're all on one team. So it doesn't work perfectly, but we do appeal if we've got mistakes or delays, and then just keep on them till we get the approval. And I think, Jessica, that's my last slide.
Okay.
Yep.
So Medicaid versus Medicare. Some people think that these are interchangeable. I guess we can thank our government for naming them very similar names, but they're both U.S. programs that cover healthcare costs for different populations. Medicare is for people that are at least age 65 or have a disability, and Medicaid is more qualified by resource based, like income, uh, some of the things that Jenny just talked about. Medicare has premiums, co-pays, co-insurance, and deductibles, and Medicaid is generally free or nearly free. Medicaid will cover like long-term care cost, stuff like that. And Medicare does not for the foreseeable future. It does for a short period of time. Sorry, that popped up where I was reading now. So Medicare coverage has Part A, which covers the inpatient hospital stays, or if they're billing for skilled nursing facility and some home health services. Part B covers outpatient services. If they're taken off of skilled, then a lot of times therapy will pick them up Part B to help pay for therapy services and move closer towards a restorative program or maintenance program. Part C is the Medicare Advantage. These are run by private insurance groups that combine Part A and Part B coverage. They do often include vision and dental, but to use those Part A uh, benefits, or what they have that's closest to Part A, mirrors Part A, their qualification is much stricter. And then we have Part D, which is the prescription drug coverage. They can elect to have just Medicare Part A and B or Medicare Advantage Plan Part C. A lot of people will move towards the Medicare Advantage plan because it's cheaper. They like the added benefits as far as the vision and dental, may have some lower drug cost. Not looking into the future that if they actually have to use it for the expensive stuff, like a skilled nursing stay in a facility, Medicare Advantage does not cover as well. Oh, I forgot much. How much does Medicare cost? Most do not pay a premium for Part A if they or their spouse have paid in their Medicare taxes while working. Part B does have a monthly premium, and it's based off of how much you elect for your deductible or copay to lower the cost of the premium. And Part D is the drug coverage is based on the chosen plan. Medicare Advantage plans have their own cost, and they can also include premiums, copays, and deductibles. And then supplemental coverage, or Medigap, is something that helps with the out-of-pocket expense for Medicare Part A, like the copays and deductibles. You cannot get Medigap if you have a Medicare Advantage plan. They do not offer the two combination. Will Medicare pay for my nursing home stay? Yes and no. If you have a qualifying hospital stay, which I think everybody's heard the 3 midnight rule, Medicare will pay for your nursing home stay as long as you qualify. Most think that because they have those 100 days that they can use those and move on to whatever their next payer source, whether that be discharge to home or Medicaid or private pay. What they don't understand is you actually do have to qualify for those days. And the qualifying hospital stay is the number one qualification. If you don't have that, you just can't use your Part A in long-term care. Now, they have passed a new rule that if you go inpatient and the hospital switches you to outpatient or observation while you're still in the hospital, then you can appeal that to see if that patient can use their benefits as far as under Part A. And you have to be discharged. Back up. There we go. You have to be discharged to a skilled nursing facility within 30 days of your qualifying hospital stay. And you have a diagnosis that indicates that you need skilled care. And Medicare Advantage plans, they require prior authorization before the client is discharged to the facility and with each review. A lot of times they're weekly. When they get close to discharging them or denying them, they'll maybe do it every 2 or 3 days. What Medicare does not pay for: long-term care, room and board in the long-term care, services not deemed medically necessary, and that's more for the skilled need, like I mentioned in the previous slide. A private room, unless it is deemed medically necessary by your physician. Ambulance transport, this must be reflected in the physician notes that it is medically necessary, or Medicare will deny it. And it specifically has to say that it's medically necessary. I'm working on an appeal I've been working on for a year now, that because the physician note and didn't say that, but the social worker note states that the physician said it, they're denying it. Care provided at a facility that is not Medicare certified. Most of the time, that's not a big issue, at least here in the Wichita area. Most of them are. I can only think of a handful that are not Medicare certified. Medicare Advantage prior authorization rules. They have reviewed it, and they do have a new set of rules. It'll be in effect in 2026. They're trying to streamline the process to improve the exchange of health information, trying to reduce the disruptions for the beneficiaries. Sometimes it can take a few days, and then they come back and say you have to issue a notice, a notice of non-coverage. So they're trying to prevent that from happening with as much notice as possible. Next slide. Medicare Part A coverage. In 2013, there was a case, Jimmo versus Sebelius. The action plan was implemented in 2017. What the class action to do is eliminate the improvement standard in skilled nursing facilities, home health agencies, and outpatient therapy. Medicare covers the services such as nursing and therapy if it's considered skilled. Now, again, to consider it skilled, they have to have that qualifying hospital stay or be within 30 days of discharge from the hospital and have a diagnosis from the physician that is medically necessary to receive the nursing and therapy services. Medicare must make an individualized assessment. It's not so much an umbrella that everybody fits under. They're going to go more diagnosis based versus restorative potential. That's no longer going to be the deciding factor. Next slide. So again, GEMO means that there's no denials based on improvement standard. As a ex-MDS coordinator, that was probably one of the most frustrating things was you have somebody that's, 90 years old that breaks their hip and, for 3 days they don't want to participate in therapy. Well, it's probably because their pain's unmanaged. So you have to get that stuff under control, and you need to make sure that they're still making progress in order to qualify for those skilled services. And if not, you have to discharge them and move them to Part B. So it's going to prevent it from being improperly denied for skilled nursing or rehab services when the denial is based on a stable or chronic condition, no expectation of improvement in a reasonable period of time. Services can be skilled and covered when the patient has plateaued. Services are maintenance only, and they shouldn't use rule of thumbs, putting everybody under the same umbrella. So they should have sent out some information to all the facilities that they were going to change their language in February of 2024. It's just that it's a maintenance coverage standard for both skilled nursing and therapy services. Again, they have to be medically necessary because it's going to be more diagnosis based versus the rehab potential and the progress that the patient is making. Next slide. Oh, went through that kind of fast. So we have some links here for you to learn more about the GEMO versus Sebelius and the changes that CMS has made because of that.
We were hoping to have some time for questions. So anything we need to get more detailed about, Anything that's come up for you guys? You can also feel free to unmute and just throw your question out there.
This is Michelle. I guess my question is, well, not really a question, a statement. We, as the facilities, have a lot of issues with contacting our liaison units and getting answers from Can Care. I don't know, I don't know how you guys go about getting that information timely. Do you have like a specific liaison unit that you contact, or how do you get your information from Can Care regarding your the people that you help with the Medicaid applications?
We call them. We don't have the same, and forgive me, I think Joy with our office is really our Medicaid expert. And I think you guys have kind of your own little window into seeing the statuses. We just have to call them. Case workers will call us for follow-ups or for more information. We have to call them back and hope that we have somebody that's trained that's working on the case. But that's how we get our status updates. Unless we get a request for information directly from them, we don't have a good way of accessing that without just calling them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not sure if anybody else has any questions. I know we've been, they always call and ask me for questions on the Medicaid applications, and I don't always know the answers because I don't want to give them the wrong answers. Because I know the Medicaid applications are definitely pretty tricky, especially when it comes to division of assets. I'm never comfortable helping them fill out the division of assets because I just don't know. But what you guys shared today was definitely very helpful because I didn't know anything about the promissory notes, like the spin down. I didn't know any of that. So that was definitely very helpful. So I do appreciate that. And if you guys could share the PowerPoint, that would be great. If we could have a copy of that, that would be terrific for the notes for later on.
Sure, I'll get it to Emily and she'll send it out.
Great, thank you.
Our social services person couldn't attend. Could you share the recording so she could see it?
Yes, I'll be happy to email the recording and the presentation. And then I'm sure that she can distribute that. Michelle can to the rest of you.
Yes.
Jenny and Jessica, if other people come up with questions afterwards, is it okay if they email with follow-up questions or anything like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Well, yeah, if nobody has any more questions, like I said, I'll get the recording and the PowerPoint to Michelle, and then she can share with the rest of you as she sees fit. And if anyone does have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact Jenny or Jessica, and we'd love to help answer any questions, any specific cases that come up, etc. If you need any more clarification on specific topics based on your occupation or anything like that, they'll be happy to help.
Thank you very much. I'm like I said, I'm glad you guys were able to have this presentation. It definitely helped me. I hope that it was able to help everybody else that was able to join the presentation. I truly appreciate it.
Good to hear.
Yep.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all and have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much.